Right now, national headlines will basically tell you that the housing market is completely frozen.
Right, like nobody is moving at all.
Exactly. They say high interest rates have locked everyone in place. But if you look at a very specific cluster of counties on the Tennessee-Virginia border, the Tri-Cities region, there is over $250 million in pure new wealth just pouring in.
It's a massive
It
influx.
really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a huge stack of 2026 real estate reports, economic analyses, and IRS migration data focused entirely on Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia.
And what you'll find when you look closely is a region that's operating as this massive high-pressure release valve for really expensive metros.
Right, specifically places like Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. We're going to explore how this out-of-state cash is fundamentally reshaping local commercial real estate, radically altering the residential maps on both sides of the state line, and creating a really critical squeeze on workforce housing.
Yeah, the contrast between the national narrative and the local data here is just stark. While the rest of the country feels economically stalled, this region is undergoing a fundamental structural transformation.
Complete shift.
Exactly. And to understand how a relatively quiet market absorbs this kind of shockwave, we need to look at the mechanics of corporate relocations, the shifting demographics, and the raw math of what it actually costs to build and buy a home here in 2026.
So, if hundreds of remote workers and defense contractors are setting up shop, we first need to understand what is actually drawing them down the I-81 corridor.
Mhm.
I mean, historically, if you ask someone familiar with the area about the local economy, the immediate answer is that it basically begins and ends with Eastman Chemical in Kingsport.
Right, and that was the anchor for decades. Eastman remains a major employer, obviously. But the recent data from Vision LLC shows the commercial real estate market has diversified into a highly complex ecosystem now.
Okay, so what's the new anchor?
Well, one of the most significant drivers of this new demand is the defense and government sector.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, we're seeing federal contractors and cybersecurity firms actively diversifying away from the incredibly expensive commercial real estate in Northern Virginia.
What the locals refer to as the Novier region.
Exactly, no VA.
Wait, I need to challenge the scale of this a bit. Because how does a defense contractor moving into a smaller market actually transform the local economy? I mean, we aren't seeing Pentagon-sized headquarters being built in Johnson City or Bristol.
No, no, you're not.
Are these companies bringing real infrastructure, or is this just like a few executives working from their laptops at a local coffee shop?
It is a completely different mechanism than a traditional corporate relocation, which is why you don't see those massive new headquarters. You are looking at a decentralized network.
Okay, a decentralized network. How does that work?
Well, because of the ongoing structural shift toward remote and hybrid work, high-earning professionals are fleeing high-cost metros like Novier, DC, and Charlotte. They're looking for a lower cost of living and a better quality of life.
Makes sense.
Right, and when these professionals relocate to the Tri-Cities, their employers realize they still need a secure professional footprint to retain that talent, especially for sensitive defense work.
Oh, because of security clearances and things like that.
Precisely. So instead of building a massive corporate campus, these defense and tech companies are leasing, say, 200 to 800 square foot satellite professional suites and co-working spaces.
So it's more like a spider web of smaller hubs spread across the region.
Exactly, a spider web.
But how does leasing a 300 square foot room translate to booming economic resilience? That sounds like a really minimal investment from the companies themselves.
You have to look at the revenue attached to those small offices. You have a cybersecurity analyst earning a Washington, D.C. salary, but spending that money locally in the Tri-Cities.
Oh, right, the local economic impact of their daily spending.
Exactly. Plus, those satellite offices require IT infrastructure, local legal counsel, administrative support. And when you combine that Novier influx with the massive footprint of Ballad Health, which is just eating up professional space, and the tech startup ecosystem spinning out of East Tennessee State University, or ETSU,
It creates a safety net.
it creates a very robust safety net. If manufacturing slows down, healthcare and defense hold the commercial market steady. This structural shift is bringing high-paying jobs and remote salaries into a market that previously relied almost entirely on local wage scales.
Okay, so if we have this spider web of satellite offices and remote workers pulling down DC salaries, that money has to be landing somewhere. Is there a way to track the actual dollars crossing the county line?
There is. And the sheer scale of the wealth transfer becomes super visible when we look at the 2022 to 2023 IRS migration data.
Right, which was recently analyzed locally by Jeff Fleming. I was looking at these numbers and they are just staggering.
They really are.
Across 9 local counties, the region gained over 6,000 net individuals. And with them came $252.7 million in net adjusted gross income.
Which is massive.
It's huge. And just to be completely clear for you listening, when the IRS says net individuals, they aren't just counting the moving trucks rolling into town.
That is a crucial distinction to make.
Yep.
Net individuals means the total number of people who moved into the region, minus the total number of people who moved out.
Right, so it's a pure surplus of bodies.
Exactly. And net adjusted gross income, or AGI, means the total income those new arrivals brought with them, minus the income of the people who left. So this region didn't just churn its population.
It captured over $250 million in pure new purchasing power.
Yes. But the map of where that wealth is landing is incredibly asymmetrical.
Oh, absolutely. The Tennessee side just dominated the gains. Sullivan County was the overall income leader, pulling in $66.6 million in net AGI, drawing heavily from the West, the South, and the Northeast.
Very heavy migration from those areas.
Yeah. Washington County, Tennessee gained the most actual people, 1,475 net individuals, and added $50 million in AGI. And Greene County added $57.4 million.
But then you look across the border to the Virginia side of the Tri-Cities, and you see a completely different economic mechanism at play.
Stop right there, because this is where the data completely breaks my brain. There is this massive Virginia paradox.
It is a paradox, for sure.
Washington County, Virginia gained 220 net people, but their adjusted gross income was essentially flat or even slightly negative by about $125,000. And Wise County, Virginia gained 67 people, but lost $363,000 in AGI.
Right.
How is the math on that even possible? If you add a couple hundred people to a county, how does the net wealth go down? Are they moving in with empty pockets?
This gets to the heart of how migration reshapes a local economy. Population gain does not automatically equal wealth gain. The mechanism here relies entirely on the economic profile of who is leaving versus who is arriving.
Okay, can you give me an analogy for that?
Sure. Imagine a cargo ship where you are unloading really heavy freight, but you're boarding a much larger number of lightweight passengers. On the Virginia side, you likely have high-income tax filers leaving the county.
Where are they going?
Some might be retiring and moving to warmer climates, but many are likely just hopping across the state line into Tennessee to take advantage of the state having no income tax.
Oh, wow. Well, at the same time, people with lower incomes are moving into Virginia to take their place.
Exactly the case. Lower or moderate income filers, perhaps entry-level workers or young families, are drawn to the relatively lower housing costs on the Virginia side.
So the headcount goes up.
But the total tax base and collective purchasing power go down. When you have this kind of uneven wealth distribution, where $250 million lands almost entirely on the Tennessee side, it creates intense localized economic disparities.
I mean, you literally have 2 counties right next to each other experiencing the same population growth, but undergoing completely different economic realities.
Yeah.
So if we map out where this $250 million is landing, how does this actually hit the street level? Because looking at the residential real estate data from Core Data and NETAR, the border between Tennessee and Virginia is creating 2 completely distinct realities.
Yeah, the state line acts like a financial dam. On one side, cash is pooling and driving up velocity, while the other side is relatively stagnant.
I mean, look at Bristol. The state line runs right down the middle of State Street. But in Bristol, Tennessee, homes average about 45 to 50 days on the market, with prices hovering around $240,000 to $260,000. You walk literally just across the street into Bristol, Virginia, and suddenly it takes 65 to 70 days to sell a home, and average prices drop to around $214,000 to $220,000. It's almost like the state line is a real estate time machine.
That's a great way to put it. The mechanism behind that is driven by tax structure and buyer sentiment. High-earning remote workers and out-of-state retirees want that Tennessee tax advantage.
Right, the no state income tax.
Exactly, which artificially inflates demand on the southern side of the border. Sellers in Tennessee know they have a highly motivated captive audience. That pushes prices up and drastically reduces the days a home sits on the market.
And if we pull back from the border and look at the urban cores, the acceleration on the Tennessee side is just staggering. Johnson City surged to take the region's top new home sales slot.
They saw a 95.8% year-over-year jump in new construction sales.
Almost doubled. And the median price for those new builds hit $388,000.
While Kingsport is employing a totally different strategy to compete.
Right, the downtown revitalization.
Yeah, downtown Kingsport is pushing a $2 million streetscape revitalization. They're specifically trying to capture young professionals and the overflow migration from Nashville and Knoxville, focusing on homes in the $140,000 to $220,000 range.
It's an aggressive move to capture the demographic that is rapidly being priced out of Johnson City. But towering above all of this is the luxury market. Pending sales of homes priced at $500,000 and up jumped nearly 49%. The data clearly points out this is heavily driven by cash buyers and out-of-state equity.
Right, you have these high-velocity, high-growth engines in the urban cores of Johnson City and Kingsport, fueled almost entirely by that Novia and out-of-state migration cash. They're moving at warp speed.
Yeah.
But the smaller towns, and specifically the Virginia side of the border, are operating at a completely different, much slower pace. The housing market has fundamentally fractured.
Which brings us to the biggest issue. If you are a seller sitting on a mountain of equity, this high-end growth and out-of-state cash sounds fantastic. But what happens to the local workforce? The teachers, the factory workers at Eastman, the nurses at Ballad Health who have to compete in this environment.
It's a squeeze. The data on workforce housing shows that housing costs across the Tri-Cities have roughly doubled since 2019.
Doubled.
Yes, and the entry-level market, which historically meant homes priced below $140,000, is rapidly thinning out. In many local neighborhoods, it has completely disappeared.
The reports show the middle class in the Tri-Cities is now splitting into two highly distinct bands. You have the lower middle class, who are incredibly payment sensitive and stuck competing for the dwindling supply of homes under $300,000.
And then you have the upper middle class.
Right, your ETSU faculty members, your specialized healthcare workers. They're the ones driving the $300,000 to $500,000 move-up market, like buying the $300,000 craftsman homes in areas like Gray.
And the traditional economic mechanism to relieve this pressure, which is new home construction, is broken for that lower middle class demographic.
Why is that, though? I mean, if there is such a massive pent-up demand for homes under $300,000, why aren't developers buying up land and throwing up massive neighborhoods of starter homes?
It basically comes down to the underlying math of construction in 2026.
The costs. Yeah.
Exactly. The cost of land, raw materials, and skilled labor has increased so significantly that a builder's profit margin on a $200,000 home is virtually non-existent.
Wow.
Yeah, to make a project financially viable, builders are forced to target the upper middle and luxury markets, where the margins are wider.
Yeah.
That's why the median new home price is almost $388,000. They simply cannot afford to build starter homes anymore.
Adding on to that, the data notes that HOA fees on these new builds average $316 a month. That alone prices out a significant portion of local wage earners before they even factor in the actual mortgage or the insurance.
Which naturally pushes those families back into the rental market.
But the rents are crazy, too. The reports show rents are skyrocketing up to 2.5 times the inflation rate in some areas of the Tri-Cities.
Yeah, it's a cascading effect.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a local resident for a second. If you're listening to this and making a local wage, how do you compete with a remote worker from D.C. who just sold their townhouse in Novier for $1 million and is dropping cash on a home in Johnson City?
You don't.
Right, you don't. And that raises a massive concern. This isn't just a housing problem anymore. This is becoming a severe workforce retention problem.
The downstream effects are highly predictable when attainable workforce housing disappears. Because locals are forced to spend so much of their income just to keep a roof over their heads, consumer spending at local businesses drops.
They have no disposable income.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the demand for rental properties surges, driving those prices even higher. Eventually, a region hits a tipping point where local workers are forced to migrate out of the area entirely because they simply cannot afford to live within a reasonable distance of their jobs.
It fundamentally changes the makeup of the community.
It alters the DNA of a region. Now, the Tri-Cities still holds an affordability edge when compared to nearby Knoxville. The median home price in the Tri-Cities is around $275,000, compared to Knoxville's $369,000.
But that gap is closing rapidly.
Very rapidly.
The region is essentially caught in a cycle of its own success. To summarize what we've unpacked today for you listening, the Tri-Cities is undergoing a historic transformation. We are seeing a diversified commercial boom fueled by companies and remote workers escaping the costs of Northern Virginia.
Yep.
We've tracked a highly asymmetrical wealth injection of over $250 million crossing the borders, leaning heavily into Tennessee. And we are looking at a deeply fractured residential housing market, one that offers incredible opportunities for out-of-state cash, but is creating a severe workforce housing squeeze for locals that builders simply cannot afford to build their way out of.
Which leaves us with a critical, lingering question to consider.
What's that?
Well, the entire economic growth engine of the Tri-Cities right now relies heavily on its reputation as the affordable, high quality of life alternative to expensive metros like Novi, DC, or even Knoxville.
Right, that's the whole draw.
But if this massive, sustained influx of wealth and migration continues to double housing costs, what happens to the region's identity and its economic momentum when that affordability edge is finally erased entirely?
Wow. What happens when the pressure valve becomes just as pressurized as the places people are running from? That is a truly fascinating thought for you to chew on. Keep looking beneath the headlines in your own local markets because the real story is always in the mechanisms behind the numbers. Until next time, thanks for joining the deep dive.